Welcome everyone to the Lithuanian Heritage Club's English language lecture, Introduction to Traditional Lithuanian Food, presented by Dr. Ona Daugirdienė. This event is part of our ongoing programs at the Lithuanian World Center to help Americans with Lithuanian roots connect more deeply with their heritage. And let's be honest, we all know one of the most memorable ways to connect with the culture is through its food. So who better to lead this culinary journey than someone I know very well, my mother. My brothers, my father, and I have had many years of experience sampling her delicious cooking, purely in the name of research, of course. But it's not just our family who has benefited from her kitchen expertise. Dr. Daugirdienė is a pediatrician by profession, a mom by vocation, and sometimes, at my father's nudging, a cooking column author. Since 2015, she has been writing the food column for Lithuanian Heritage magazine, an English language publication that features Lithuanian history, current events, and yes, food. Though she's tried to retire from writing this column more than once, the positive feedback she's received about her articles, whether they're about beets, desserts, or other traditional dishes, has encouraged her to continue. Readers often share how much they enjoy not just the recipes, but the stories and cultural insights that come with them. Beyond her culinary skills, my mom has a deep love for her Lithuanian roots. The daughter of Lithuanian immigrants, she has dedicated much of her life to preserving and passing on Lithuanian traditions. Whether organizing Lithuanian summer camps, helping at church, compiling a Lithuanian hymnal, or co-editing a history book on Lithuanian women, she has poured years of heart and soul into our Lithuanian community. And today she brings that same spirit of love, dedication, and cultural pride to the lecture you are about to hear. Before we begin, a quick note for the audience. We'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please do not wait until the very end. Please type it into the chat window during the lecture. I'll be reading the questions as they come in, and we'll compile a list of the most popular or representative questions to ask our presenter at the end. Since our time is limited, we will start with those and see if there's time for more. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our presenter, my mom, Dr. Ona Daugirdienė. And just 1 second while we unmute the other computer.
Good evening. I'm really happy to see all of you here. I hope I do justice to all of your expectations. And just so you know, I paid Šarūnas to give me that glowing testimonial. So isn't it interesting about our connection to our roots? We may live or have been born far from our motherland, but we may no longer speak or read or maybe even understand the language. But the ties to our history, to the land of our forefathers, to our ancestors, is almost primeval. Those ties are very, very deep and often difficult to articulate. We just feel them and know they're there. And I know that's true for all of you that have joined today. And I suspect that these ties are part of the reason why we are all together here this evening. And in particular, the ties to our food heritage remain such an important part of our Lithuanian identity, even when language and tradition and culture may no longer be easily accessible to some of us. I experienced this truth when my husband, Jonas, took over what he thought would be an emergency temporary post as editor of Lithuanian Heritage magazine that Šarūnas already referred to. This public magazine is published in English. It features all kinds of articles about history and culture. And because subscriptions were ongoing, he really had to jump into the role. He had to find authors and topics, proofreaders, publishers, the whole shebang. And he was really overloaded. And the magazine also featured recipes in every issue. And finding someone to write the recipes for him was the final straw. I remember he just waved his hands and Jonas said, no recipes. We don't need recipes. I'm not putting them in. They are not important. Well, when his first issue minus the recipes came out, He quickly found out that recipes were very important. He got an avalanche of reader complaints. Where are the recipes? We want our recipes. And Jonas realized that connection to our ancestral food traditions are also Lithuanian heritage. So anyway, let's get on with the show and down to business. And firstly, to lower expectations right out of the gate, this is not going to be an America's Test kitchen show or a YouTube cooking demonstration. Unfortunately, while this would be a beyond cool, logistics and time are not with us. And so I am not making kougalis on camera this evening, but as a compromise later in the talk, I will share some secret tips about making well-known dishes in your own kitchen. And we'll start moving forward. Except my slides aren't advancing. Okay, so to start off, let's start with a bit of history and think about what is Lithuanian cooking? Not yet. So it's tempting, it's very tempting to conflate all Lithuanian cooking into a single homogeneous picture made up of a few very familiar dishes. But it's important to remember that cuisine changed over the ages as various influences and contacts and travels and traders came into play. And even some food staples that today we associate 100% with Lithuania were totally unknown. And here I'm specifically referring to the potato. And in addition, historically, people of different social statuses ate differently, and people of different regions in Lithuania ate differently. So it's really not very simple to define what is Lithuanian cooking and even what is traditional. So if you ask Google, you type it in, what is the national dish of Lithuania? What answer inevitably pops up? Cepelinai. And yes, this dish might get the nod for recognizability. However, national dishes really should meet some other requirements. And one of those, it should be associated with traditions of the country. And Lithuania, being an agrarian country, grains and dairy were big parts of its cuisine. And foods that use grains and dairy are quite traditional. Foods should be mentioned in ancient texts, and we have those ancient texts dating from the 1400s, the 1500s, where they mention ingredients and foods that people ate. These are important because they give us a little foundation for foods that we see today. The main ingredients should be found locally. So, for example, banana bread could never be a national food of Lithuania because bananas are not local to Lithuania. And lastly, the dish should be popular and widely known. This last requirement, to my mind, is a little wiggly, and even though cepelinai would certainly fulfill that requirement, but when you think of, say, the UK today, and their most popular fast food, fish and chips, which is for sure traditional, main ingredients found locally, blah, blah, blah. Fish and chips is no longer the most popular fast food in the UK. And what is? It's curry of all sorts is the most popular takeout food. And yet probably no Brit would want to admit curry as its national dish. So even these requirements are a little bit, I call them wiggly. So definitions are slippery and changeable, and they miss some things and they overemphasize other things. And so when talking about Lithuanian food and what is Lithuanian traditional food, I kind of like to revert to Justice Potter Stewart's definition of pornography during Supreme Court deliberations in 1964. He said, "I know it when I see it." And that's kind of the way I feel about Lithuanian food. So I already mentioned that not everyone in Lithuania ate the same way. What was common for some was rare for others, and social standing was certainly a great divider. Remember, Lithuanian was a world power in its day. Its kings and dukes married into Europe's royal families. The gentry experienced world cuisines. They held extravagant banquets. They kept enormous kitchens. And what they ate was far from the simple food we tend to associate with historical Lithuania. Their larders were full of exotic meats like doves, thrushes, pheasants, geese, animal meats like stag, boar, and auroch, which is extinct, I believe, as we speak. Local grains were supplemented with rice. Spices included ginger and cinnamon, and all these things were brought by traders from faraway lands. And of course, there were fine wines and rare fruits. Now, what I just told you, you might think is quite irrelevant to traditional Lithuanian food. But be aware that this royal cuisine is being rediscovered by food historians and being adapted into modern recipes. And the Lithuanian cooking culture is circling around from the rough Cepelinai kougalis image to embrace the re-emergence of finer cuisine with these traditions from the past. So you've heard it here first. I'm letting you know, French food snobs, watch out. Lithuanians are coming. And Google might have to revise its algorithms. So that's what we know what the gentry ate. What did the simple folk eat? Remember, in pre-industrialized agrarian world, you eat what you grow. So in Lithuanians' northern short growing climate, grains were very, very important. Rye and barley were the predominant grains. Rye was for bread. Barley was used for most other dishes, porridges, pancakes, and the like. Wheat was a very minor player, and wheat flour was saved for special occasions like baking ragaišis, which was essentially just white bread for weddings or Easter. But baking white bread for these occasions was considered like exotic. Meat was precious, obviously, so it was eaten in larger quantities also just on special occasions. And the predominant meat was pork. Chickens were needed for eggs, cows were needed for milk, but everyone could afford to feed a few spring piglets until slaughter in the fall, when the meat was smoked, brined, cured, and preserved so it would last until the following fall. And interesting, pork, despite modern times, is still the #1 meat in Lithuania today. Vegetables for people were pretty basic and self-limited to those that kept well once harvested. So they ate cabbage and turnips and beets. And I did mention that potatoes were latecomers to Lithuania. So what about those potatoes? Where were they? Because they should be at the top of the list. But this may surprise you, but remember, potatoes were not native, not to the old world, not to the new world. They actually originated in Peru. And it took hundreds of years for potatoes to reach Lithuania. And that path came by way of the Hanseatic trade routes in northern Germany and Prussia, southern Scandinavia. And by 1800s, there were potatoes in Lithuania, but they were not for eating. They were for making spirits, vodka equivalent, whatever. Someone discovered that you could get a much higher yield of spirits from a quantity of potatoes than you could get from grains. And the first Lithuanian cookbook that was published as late as 1893, included no recipes with potatoes. So potatoes, even at that time, were still not a thing. I mean, with time, potatoes, yes, they caught on, but food historians claim that potato dishes really took off during Soviet times. And obviously that's because food was so skimpy and short in every other aspect. And most specialists give potatoes in Lithuania 100-year, maybe up to 150-year history. So this is not at all what we assume. And just a final comment about other veggies. back in the day, vegetables such as cucumbers or leeks or lettuces, they were mostly grown in the manor house gardens. The country folk did not eat those. Tomatoes, which we take so for granted, became popular only after World War I. Sugar, which also we take for granted. Sugar was usually sourced from beets, not from sugarcane. So sugar arrived in the 1800s, but rarely used by common folk. They relied on honey for sweetening, but honey also was saved for special occasions. And the drink that the folks relied on, besides water and milk, in the old days, everyone drank Midos, which is a type of mead. But over time, it was replaced by beer and gira and seasonal drinks such as birch sap. I just want to say a word about Midos. It has at least 1,000-year history in Lithuania. And it's a fermented alcoholic beverage. So it's not distilled like a spirit, but fermented. And its base is water and honey. And look at the list of seasonings or flavorings that ancient mead makers used: thyme, lemon, cherries, linden blossoms, juniper berries, hops. I read that list and I thought today's artisanal spirit creators should learn from our ancestors how to make an amazing drink. I think it's coming back, by the way. So cuisine also varies by region. It varies by social status. It varies by region. And I will quickly highlight some particulars. So Aukštaičiai, also I call them the Highlanders. They are known for their delicious flour or dough dishes. So all types of pancakes with and without fillings, koldūnai, all kinds of dumplings. Soup is also a big on their menus. And Aukštaičiai are known for a very original soup, beer soup. And I hope we all, before we head off to La La Land, have a chance to try beer soup because it sounds very interesting. Their desserts were usually fried, so like pončkos, žagarėliai, spurgos, all kinds of fried donuts. And then there's the beer. We all know how good the beers in Aukštaitija are, especially the beers from the Biržai area. The Southerners, those are the dzūkai. The soil in southern Lithuania is sandy. It's not very fertile, and it's covered with pine forests. So these two characteristics, poor soil and pine forests, determine Dzūkijos culinary specialties. The forests are full of mushrooms. So dzūkai are known for making mushroom everything. And the poor soil that won't support other grain is perfect for buckwheat, which hates rich soil. You plant buckwheat in rich soil, it's not going to make the seeds. You're just going to get leaves. And buckwheat happens to be a nutritional powerhouse. So I thought to myself, God really knew how to care for his people, because the folk in Dzūkija were traditionally looked upon as the poorest. And dzūkai make a superior homemade rye spirit, and are also renowned for their cured meat called vytinta mėsa. Suvalkiečiai, I call these the Middleearthers. If you look at a map of Lithuania and there's that notch on the western side of the map, that's where Suvalkija is. And the people of this region, they eat their beet soup with special, very cute dumplings. They're famous for their black currant wine, but their claim to fame is skilandis. It's made from cut up, seasoned meat, which is stuffed into casing that can be either large intestine or stomach. It's then pressed and then smoked. And this particular product is considered so unique to Lithuania, so historical, and of course, so delicious that the European Union has designated skilandis as an item of acknowledged cultural heritage. And to give you a little context, another food item that's found in Europe that is also on this EU list is the Scottish haggis, if you're familiar with that. So Skilandis is up there with famous food. And this is a picture of what it looks like when it's stuffed. It's probably stuffed into a stomach, and what it looks like sliced. Jamaice are the lowlanders, and these are the last region that I'll be mentioning. They also happen to have a claim to fame that has made it onto the EU Heritage Food List. And they are known for the unique dairy spread called Cuisine, which is made from heating and beating cream into a buttery spread. They eat this on bread, they eat this with potatoes, but it is unique. And even though the ingredient is just basically one thing, apparently the process is so particular that not everybody can make it, even when they are given the right directions. In general, dairy products from Žemaitija, like milk, sour cream, curds, cheese, are regarded as Lithuania's best, even to this day. And you can get at various our US grocery stores, Žemaitijos sviestas, Žemaitijos pienas. So, and of course, the other things on the list is the Žemaičiai are known for. So we talked about cuisine that was determined by social status, also by region, but certain very traditional and iconic foods are linked to special occasions or holidays. And I'm going to mention just 3 of such instances. So one of those is Kouchos, which we all know is Christmas Eve. So the Jamaice or the Lowlander, or sorry, these should not be Lowlanders, this should be Southerners. Where am I? No, I'm sorry, I got myself confused. The Lowlanders, the Jamaice, they make dishes with canapes or the hemp seeds. The Dzukai or the Southerners, of course, they've got the mushrooms, the buckwheat, so that's what they always include on their table. Everyone in Lithuania makes the 12 dishes. And of them, Coocha, which is listed here first, is maybe not very well known. It probably should be known because it is the most archaic. It is the most sacred, and it's made out of grain and sweetened with water and honey, so diluted honey. And Coocha needs to be shared. Everyone at the table takes a spoon of Coocha, almost like sharing the Christmas wafer and wishing each other good wishes. Coocha is the food that not only gave the name to Christmas Eve, Kouchos, but is also a sacred dish. Okay, there's fish, the herring, which we can't do without on Kouchos, kisielius, which is made, we make it from cranberries, but in the old days, it was also made from oats, and it is some people call it cranberry pudding. Let's leave it at that. Then sližikai, also called preskučiai, and nowadays kūčiukai. They're the little dough squares that are eaten with aguonų pienas, which is the poppy seed milk. But food historians have listed 100 different dishes that are eaten at Kūčias and still comply with all the restrictions that traditionally Kūčios entails. Užgavėnes, or Fat Tuesday, probably could be called Fat Week, not just Tuesday, because in olden days they used to carouse for an entire week. It has the greatest number of foods that are specifically associated with this holiday. Šupinys, for example, is made from barley and some type of legume like dried peas, dried beans, into a mash, and it always has a surprise. And that surprise is typically a pig's tail that is buried in the pot, and whoever scoops out the pig's tail is said to have extra good luck that year. Kiunke is a potato and dried pea mash. Šaltiena is what Americans call head cheese. And again, even though in my family, we usually saved it and made it for Velykos or Easter, I read that šaltiena was a užgavėnių food because it used up all the meat scraps that were left over from Christmas butchering So I thought, Lithuanians didn't waste a thing. And then there's all the fried things. Sklinžiai are small pancakes. Then there's the large pancakes. Then there's spurgos and pončkos, which are small donuts, large donuts. And the idea is to eat very greasy, eat a lot, because for the next 40 days, you're heading for metaphorical bread and water. And the last special occasion is Velykos, or Easter. It's a joyous time, and it's a time to make up for the hard fast that everyone just undertook. So the table is generously spread with meat that is not ordinarily seen or served every day, such as veal and roast pig, ham, duck, goose. It's a spread. The desserts are delicious almond cakes, some of them called mozurėliai, raisin babkas, and of course, margučiai, which are the important symbolic dyed and decorated eggs. Lithuanians are very, very close to the land and nature and very religious. So food historians have identified 46 different occasions when a day is marked with food and eating something particular. Some occasions were religious and church holidays, some non-religious, but these non-religious were usually agrarian holidays and associated with like bringing in the hay, harvesting, and even such small moments as marking the end of mushroom picking. So each of these had food and feasting, and Lithuanians knew how to make their way around a table. I want to mention just a few things about food during Soviet times. Eating and cooking during Soviet time had its minuses, had its pluses. Of course, the big minus was scarcity of food. It was called deficitai, and there was a deficit of everything. I mean, we all know that if you were walking down the street and saw a line in front of a store, you didn't ask what the store was selling. You just got in the line because it was selling something that you would want. This scarcity and this inability to cook like your mother cooked, like your grandmother cooked, did cause a loss of some historical memory. Current housewives didn't know, and they couldn't make what their ancestors made. It was also difficult to create new things. And this is the time when potatoes came into the cuisine. Everything was potatoes. They were everywhere. They were cheap. They were plentiful. Thank goodness they were nutritious, and people came up with ways to use them. And I also think during this time, one other thing came into the cuisine, which is garlic. It definitely came in from Russians like their garlic. I think they used it to hide the smell and the taste of food that had perhaps gone past its prime. And from Soviet times to today, garlic is a pretty big presence, let's put it that way. The pluses during Soviet times were that cooks had to become creative. You had to know how to make something, and something good, from nothing. So everyone was a pretty good cook. And again, because they couldn't make new things, certain traditions remained unchanged. And now I want to mention the cepelinas problem. It's just kind of a cute way for me to frame the question. Is it Lithuanian? As I mentioned at the start, Google search identifies it as our national food. We serve it to our non-Lithuanian guests as a representative dish. It's on the menus of our community picnics and banquets. We all sort of identify cepelinas as Lithuanian, but is it? Well, just like defining what is traditional and what, there's a yes and a no. Is it Lithuanian? Yes and no. On the no side, well, we know that the potato was a relative newcomer to Lithuania. It has a short history in Lithuania. And potato dumplings were being made in northern Germanic lands before they ever came to Lithuania. So perhaps Germans have dibs, and we just stole it from them. But on the yes side, that it is Lithuanian, is the argument that, well, yeah, the Germans made some kind of dumplings, but for them in their country, dumplings never became a main attribute of Germanic or Scandinavian cuisine. For us, it is. And secondly, their dumplings were not zeppelinly. We make them our own way. So while maybe not 100% authentic, we have come to own zeppelinly. And as a parallel example, I can mention the tree cake, shakotis, called shakotis. Yes, the Baumkuchen, as it was called in Germany, came from Germany about 100 years ago. But the Germans have essentially abandoned it. And now not only they, but many other countries identify the magnificent shakotis as Lithuanian. So perhaps we can just put the little tag on the cepelinas and say made in Lithuania, and we're good. So in summary, for this particular part, I think we think of traditional cuisine as cast in stone and the same for everyone. But in actuality, we see it's a beautiful collection of old and new, and we kind of know it when we see it. So we'll just leave it at that. So chapter 2. Now I'm going to give you some pearls. And I want to give you a little explanation what I mean by pearls. In medical school, I had an anatomy professor, an old school professor. He was from Argentina. He spoke with an accent. He was a phenomenal teacher. And there was so much to learn in anatomy, so many details, so much information. He would talk. And then at the end, he would say, and students, now I'm going to give you the pearl. This is everything I told you. This is the one thing you have to remember. This is what's important. So now I'm going to share what I think are some pearls about common foods that we all make. Okay, let's start with kougalis, which I have not mentioned so far. These are the pearls. Use the right potatoes. They have to be starchy potatoes. And how do you know what is a starchy potato? Well, we have red, we have Yukon, which is kind of a golden potato, and then we have what I used to call Idaho, but what now is fashionable to call russet, because they are grown not only in Idaho. So the red potatoes have least starch. Yukons have sort of medium starch. Idaho has the most starch. And in addition, if you ever come across, like in late spring, early summer in the grocery store, the potato bin has a sign on it that says new potatoes. New potatoes means the very first ones that just got dug up, the first ones of the season. Those are absolutely not starchy. So don't use red, don't use new potatoes. Use either the russets or a combination of russets and Yukons for good starchy potatoes. Second thing is you have to scald the potatoes. Every recipe for good kougalis should include some milk, and especially it should include evaporated milk, which is milk that's been boiled down to half of its dilution. So you don't have to thin things out as much. And that milk should be brought to a scald and poured on your potatoes to set the starches. And then your kougalis will have some body. And the last thing is butter. And with this one, I'll tell you a little story. When I was writing or planning on writing the article for Lithuanian Heritage magazine about kougalis, I needed a good recipe, a really good recipe. And I knew a lady and a family who made the most delicious kougalis ever. Everyone agreed that Mrs. X's kougalis was like the bomb. Well, she died, and I approached family members for the recipe. Please, we will honor your mother's legacy. We will put her name on the recipe in the magazine. You'll get all the credits. And the family said, no, there's a secret ingredient in our kougalis. We cannot give that secret away. I tried probably for about a year to get that recipe out of the family. No, they did not agree. And then I got a recipe unsolicited from a heritage reader that looked very good. And I was already writing it up to put in the magazine. But I happened to be talking to a good friend and mentioning my unsuccessful attempts to get Mrs. X's recipe. She says, oh, Mrs. X, many, many years ago, she gave me the recipe. I'll give it to you. And the interesting thing is that secret ingredient was the same ingredient that this unsolicited reader had written in, and it was butter, but a lot of butter, a whole stick of butter melted into a 5-pound amount of potatoes. So it's butter that will make all the difference in your kougalis. Okay, balandele, stuffed cabbage. This is the first point is a very small thing. You shave the rib off the leaf because no, it's very hard. It's tough. You can't roll up the cabbage. So just shave the rib. And the second point is a little bit of science. Almost all the recipes that you can find on the internet, from Martha Stewart, who has Polish roots, to Polish cooks, to whatever, they all put some kind of tomato product in on their balandele, but they add it in right at the beginning. And this is bad science because, well, animal cells are bounded by cell membranes. Those are the little, cells are the little packages that we're made up of. Plant cells are bounded by cell walls. And the cell wall is made out of cellulose and lignin and all kinds of fiber things. And tomato, which is an acid, prevents that cellulose from softening. So if you put the acid ingredient in at the beginning, you're going to be boiling or cooking your balandele until tomorrow, whatever. So put the tomato, whatever you use, tomato sauce, a little ketchup, whatever, put it in at the end when your balandele are done. It'll be so much better. Okay, we all see these are potato pancakes. Potatoes and onions, grated potatoes, grated onions, salt and pepper, no flour. If you get a potato pancake recipe that says, oh, put half a cup of flour in there, no, that's not a good recipe. You'll get doughy, claggy pancakes. You want potatoes and onions. Sometimes if your potato, the potato you chose was a little watery, like for kougalis, well, maybe you need a tablespoon or two of flour. I won't penalize you on that, but try not to use recipes that want you to add a lot of flour. And then, of course, in order to get all those crispy bits, you have to be generous with your oil, and not flip them until the first side is done. Okay, our problem, our Lithuanian food problem, the tapelas. Okay. When you grate it on the box grater, it takes a little while. If you have a machine, from Lithuania, you can get the potatoes grated in under a minute. Food processor, I've had friends who use it and say it's okay. I don't know about that because it destroys the structure of the starches, and sometimes you get really gluey potatoes. So, but at any rate, if you grate slowly, of course, your potatoes oxidize and they get gray and whatever. So oftentimes the recipe says, grind up a vitamin C tablet and put it in, because obviously it's an acid. But unfortunately, the tablet has all kinds of other things in it. It's got talc, it's got fillers, it's got whatever. And maybe it won't affect the flavor, but it could give you an off taste. So if you're going to be making a lot of cepelini, go online, buy a bottle of ascorbic acid, which is just in a little jar, little powder, sprinkle in, and you're done. Second pearl is recycle the starch. You cannot, when you grate the potatoes and then pour off the water, make sure the starch stays behind and that you include it in your mixture. And then, of course, the secret sauce. This picture shows sour cream and probably butter, which is lovely. My family's secret sauce is fried up bacon bits with onion and then sour cream, diluted with a little bit of water. That's my secret sauce. Okay, these are koldunai. When I read the documents describing how koldunai, or virtiniai, sometimes they're called, in ancient documents, I was amazed about the meat composition. They wanted you to use 1 part suet, which is the meat fat, 1 part suet to 4 parts meat. And I thought, this is probably why my mother's koldunai were so delicious back in the day. My mother died at the age of 100. And when I remember her koldunai, I mean, my father and all of us, we ate them with large soup spoons because they were the size of 2 bites. And when you bit into it, all this beautiful broth and it just poured out into your spoon. So now I don't make koldunai very often, but I add butter in the meat because I don't have access to suet. So some kind of butter in the meat, and don't buy the 90% lean. Buy the fattest meat, that if a pre-ground meat if you have it. And then the dough, it wants to fight you sometimes when you roll it out. So just rest it and you'll be good. Riešutinės tortas, or the nut tort. 3 pearls. The nuts are key. They have to be fresh. They have to be roasted, and they have to be chopped fine, but not into flour. And hazelnuts have to be in there. Otherwise, it's not Lithuanian. To me, it's not Lithuanian. In our house, we call hazelnuts lietuviški riešutai, which means Lithuanian nuts. Every layer needs a cake soak to give it good flavor. A cake soak is some kind of liquid that you brush on your layers before putting on the frosting. So for me, it's cream sherry. It gives it such an amazing fragrance and such an amazing flavor. The alcohol is long evaporated by the time you eat it. So it makes a tortas. And then the frosting, mocha. And mocha, by definition, is a combination of chocolate and coffee. There's something about those two, the little bitterness of the coffee, the sweetness of the chocolate. So Napoleonas. We know it. We love it. We've eaten our share of terrible Napoleone, I'm sure. And some people, of course, it's made up of basically flaky pastry layers, some kind of vanilla filling. And for me, it's got to be a fruit layer. And I pick apricot puree. Now, some people, for the vanilla pastry cream, they will shortcut and they'll go to a Jello vanilla pudding. Oh, don't do that. That's terrible. Or they'll go with buttercream. Well, don't go with buttercream. It's so buttery and your layers are already buttery. I've eaten Napoleon where I thought I was eating a piece of Land O'Lakes stick of butter. That's not good. So you have to cook a pastry cream. It's like a custard. If you get this next issue of Lithuanian Heritage is going to have a recipe and a little tutorial about Napoleon. And the apricots, if you make your own puree from good apricots, like boil it with some water and just mash it up, the apricot is sweet, it's tart, and it just breaks up the butter flavor. It breaks up the pastry cream layer. It just makes your Napoleonas pop. Šaltibarščiai, cold beet soup. I have a secret ingredient. You're gonna laugh. It's potato water. Well, what is potato water? Growing up, whenever my mother boiled potatoes, for just boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, whatever, she would throw in an onion And if she had a parsnip in the vegetable drawer, she threw in some cut up parsnips. And parsnips are relatives of, I believe, horseradish and carrots, whatever. So, and salt, of course. So by the time her potatoes were boiled, she had this excellently flavored, salty vegetable broth. And of course, when we serve szaltybarszcze, we always want potatoes on the side. So I save the potato water, chill it, and when I make the szaltybarszcze, that's what I use instead of just plain tap water to dilute whatever dairy. It makes all the difference. You are adding tons of good flavor with that potato water. So, okay, Vinegaretas, which is beet potato salad. First thing is proportions. American potato salad is all potatoes, maybe a little hard-boiled egg, maybe a little celery, but it's potatoes. Vinegaretas is maybe a smaller half is potatoes, and the rest is beets and carrots and pickles and peas. And my secret ingredient, the second one, is an apple. You take a nice sweet tart apple and you dice it up very, very fine so that people almost don't know that it's in there. And that little bit adds such a pop to every bite that people don't know why this tastes so good. But there's that little tart, little sweet, little crunch, and it's wonderful. Pickle juice, along with, of course, lemon juice. That pickle juice that from the pickles you put in is, it has that nice bright tartness. So if you need a little, your potatoes are just cloyingly bland, add a little pickle juice. And then, of course, cut everything small. You don't want to be eating, like board game dice size pieces of potato. No. Varškės sūris. I believe varškės sūris, or people call it baltas sūris, white cheese, farmer's cheese. I believe it also might be on the EU list of heritage Lithuanian foods. So some people just heat the milk, dump the sour cream or the buttermilk and make the curds. But my mother taught me that you first need to ferment the milk, make rūgštus pienas or soured milk. So the milk with the buttermilk needs to stand on your stove and ferment for 2, maybe 3 days. And then when it turns into a gel, that's when you turn the heat on and make the curds and press the cheese. It just adds a whole other layer of flavor. It's like the difference between sourdough bread and not. Okay, gira. Before kombucha came to town, it was very hard to explain to people what gira was. But now that there's kombucha, you can say it's like gira. It's a fermented drink with natural yeasts. And my pearl is the raisin. When I was preparing, again, an article for Lithuanian Heritage, I was collecting I wanted 3 different recipes for gira. And it's interesting, every one of them would tell you the water, the black bread, then the sugar, the whatever. And then they would always say in your jar or your bottle, put in a raisin. A raisin. And I thought, what is with one raisin? I thought maybe it's like pagan, it's kind of magic. You need one raisin. But as it turned out, the reason for the raisin was the gira ferments because of the presence of natural yeasts that are on all of our skins. It's in the air, it's in our house, it's everywhere. Natural yeasts are everywhere. The raisin, it was a grape in its previous life. And growing outside, it had natural wild yeasts on its skin. So as it dried, those yeasts stay there, and you put that in, and you're basically inoculating your gira with that raisin. Nowadays, when raisins are commercially made, I have no idea whether there's yeast on there or not. But and the other story about gira is it's sort of a sideline. But I visited Soviet Lithuania 3 times many, many years ago. Each visit could have been a plot for a Le Carré spy movie. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But our relatives who had nothing to treat us with, very much, when we went out for a walk in Vilnius, and they want to offer us some refreshment. Okay, we'll take some refreshment. And a small tanker truck spewing black smoke and rattling pulls up to the curb. And there's a spout at the back end of this tanker truck. A nice rotund woman comes out, and people start lining up. I'm like, what is this? Well, that's the Gira tanker. And you can, for a couple kopecks, you can buy a glass of Gira and have, a little something to drink. Well, but the problem was everyone drank from the same glass. There was only one glass. And of course, there's nowhere for that lady to wash it out. So one guy drinks it, he hands it back to her. You give her your kopecks, she gives you the glass. You drink. So hygiene. None of us got sick, but it was interesting. Rauginti agurkai, fermented cucumbers. Just a little comment of what the word rauginti means. Even though we tend to call pickles rauginti agurkai, pickles should actually be called marinuoti agurkai because they're made with vinegar. Rauginti means naturally fermented. It's those natural cucumbers. So in order to make real rauginti agurkai, you need not the little just branches of dill that come with the rubber band, but the ones you can get at the farmer's market with the seed heads. There's something, the pollen, the seed heads, something. There's some kind of magic in there that makes your agurkai perfect. And then the recipes often said, put in an oak, a cherry, or a black currant leaf. And just like the raisin, for a long time, I didn't know what was the deal with these leaves. Like, what's with the leaves? It turns out that each of these leaves contains a lot of tannin. And tannin keeps your cucumbers crunchy. So if you have an oak tree in your yard, or cherry, or some black currants, and you're making agurkai, pop some leaves in. Hopefully your cucumbers will be crunchy. Oh, so that's the last pearl. And chapter 3 was going to be resources. Those resources are going to be provided to you at a later date because I couldn't locate them, believe it or not. But in the spirit of terrible self-aggrandizement, I'm going to give you one resource, which is the magazine that Šarūnas referred to and that I refer to, if you're not familiar with it. It's Lithuanian Heritage magazine is a combined subscription along with a newspaper, Draugas News, 12 issues of Draugas News, Lithuanian Heritage quarterly magazine, $45. And it's beautiful, like this one with the hill forts. The recipe was kougalis. The one with the tower, buckwheat. It was recipes with the buckwheat. This one with the little eagles, it was about riešutinis tortas. And the one with the angel was recipes with beets, to say nothing of all the interesting articles that go along. So if any of you are not familiar with it, you have $45 burning a hole in your pocket. You can see where you can subscribe at draugas.org. I really recommend it. I think every one of you will find it interesting and enjoyable. A lot of love goes into those magazines, and they're beautiful. So now I'm going to hand it over to Šarūnas. If any questions came up, I will try to answer. Hopefully I can say something.
Okay. Yeah, we'll jump right into the questions. We have at least 4, so we'll do them in the order they were submitted. So Victoria Wrestler wants to know, have you authored a cookbook, or are the recipes only in the magazines?
It's funny you should ask, because people keep telling me they want a cookbook and they want the recipes in these magazines, because there's 20 years of recipes in these magazines. So once my life gets a little bit less hectic, I think we're going to go, we're going to get to work on a cookbook, because I can see that a lot of people are interested. There are cookbooks out there, and hopefully in the resources that we'll put into a PDF, I'll try to list make a list of all the cookbooks that are easily available. But thank you for that nice question.
Okay, next question from Susan. How is kougalis differentiated from kugel, the traditional Jewish dish?
Well, a lot of the recipes for kugel that I've seen is made not with potatoes, but with a pasta product that has beaten eggs and milk poured over it and then baked in the oven as a casserole. I think some Jewish recipes make the kougalis with potatoes like we do, but if you look up Jewish kugel, a lot of it will be made with a pasta product. Besides, we have all the secrets to making the best kougalis, so Lithuanian is number one.
Okay, there was a question from Renee and Caitlin Donnelly about where to find the magazine and more recipes, but that was shared. Ingrid asks, what type of beets do you put into szaltybarszcze, pickled or regular?
Oh, before I answer the szaltybarszcze and the beet question, I will also comment that if you subscribe to Draugas News / Lithuanian Heritage and get an ID and like a login password, you will have access to 20 years of all of the magazines for free at no cost to you. The only bad thing is our even though each magazine has a table of contents, we don't have a separate index for the recipe. So if you're looking for kougalis, you might have to look through a number of issues before you find it. So maybe that's something we'll also work on and publish an index of recipes for people. Okay, the question about szaltybarszcze and pickled beets. The only thing about pickled beets might actually be very good. I won't criticize them, but the only thing that I don't like is that most people use canned. And the canned beet, already its texture, its color, it's different. So I prefer using a fresh beet that I've boiled and shredded myself. But because I wanted to try pickling pickled beets in my szaltybarszcze, I once made homemade pickled beets with regular beets, and the soup was the szaltybarszcze were delicious. I once even put in, instead of fresh cucumbers, or in addition to fresh cucumbers, I tried a little Vlasic pickles or whatever, and that was good too. So either way, but I'm not a fan of canned beets, pickled or not pickled. But that's just me. A lot of people just prefer the convenience, and I'm not going to criticize that.
Okay, question from Mary. What would you recommend as the best online source for Lithuanian recipes?
Oh, that's a good one. I have yet to find one, to be honest, because a lot of the online websites that come from Lithuania, they might have sort of what we've been talking about is sort of traditional Lithuanian cooking recipes, but then they have all kinds of generic recipes. The majority of their websites are full of sort of generic recipes that you could find in any American cookbook kind of thing. So, but since I'm going to be researching that question in order to make up a good list for all of you, I'll really try to find, and I'll put a star by the one that I think is the best resource. So sorry, but I don't have one to recommend at this time.
Okay, question from Darius. What different types of koldunai fillings do you prefer or advise against?
Well, I love koldunai with mushrooms, but especially the baravykai or the boletus. mushrooms, killer for me. And then the meat dumplings. In Lithuania, they're almost always made with pork. We sort of mentioned that pork is their favorite meat. I grew up with always the filling being beef, but actually, I think 50-50 would be optimal. Beef still has that sort of good beefy flavor. That's good, and pork adds a little tenderness. Koldunai with curds or cottage cheese, I don't have an opinion about that. I really haven't had any. And then there's, of course, šaltanosiai, which are koldunai that are filled with blueberries and eaten in the summer. If you've had a šaltanosis with slightly sweet and sour cream, you will think you've died and gone to heaven. Those are amazing. Kodėl čia sako host would like you to unmute?
Oh, galėjai X paspaust.
Any more questions?
Yes. Alicia asks if you could give us one recipe.
Oh,
I mean,
oh. You want a recipe right now? Would you settle for me including a couple recipes if I add them on to the end of that resource document that I'm going to prepare for you? Because the logistics prevent me from pulling up a recipe, or do they? Could we? No. Yeah.
Maybe add.
Yeah, on this in this Zoom format, it's hard for me to pull up because I do have them, but I promise I'll add them on to the PDF of all the resources.
Okay, there are a couple more questions. What region is the name Virtine used for koldunai?
That's a good bar question. What's it called when you have a bar contest? I don't know which region of Lithuania uses Virtine, to be honest. We're going to have to ask Grok about that. He'll definitely know.
Okay, question from Ingrid. Where could you buy the potato grating machine used to make kougalis?
Oh, I got that one. It's lietuvėlė.com. So like Lietuva, but Lietuvėlė, the diminutive. Suddenly, could you double check that? I think it's lietuvėlė.com. They sell them. I forget how much they cost. They're wonderful. They can grate 5 pounds of potatoes in literally a minute. They're wonderful.
Put that in the chat?
Oh, put the answer to the lietuvėlė.com in the chat.
I've just added the I've just put a link to Lietuvėlė in the chat. I just put
are you suddenly you're muted?
That's okay. I'm using your microphone.
Oh, did the participants hear Šarūnas? He was a little far away from the mic, but he said he put the lietuvėlė.com link into the chat.
Chat.
Can I say that I think that Old Vilnius also, I've seen them there in Doubters Grove if you're in the area.
Donna, thank you very much. What she said is Lietuvėlė and Old Vilnius Cafe are sister enterprises, businesses. Lietuvėlė is the online store for Vilnius Cafe. So if you're in Chicago and you visit Vilnius Cafe in Darien, you can walk out with one. Ačiū, Donna. That's
okay. A couple more questions. Do you have a favorite recipe for viritos?
You know what? My brother has a secret recipe. He claims it's the best one. Of course, virita is what the Baltimore Lithuanians call krupnikas. And yeah, if you want a true virita, then you got to talk with someone from Baltimore. But if you want a good recipe, the recipe for krupnikas, I'm just thinking we might have it in Heritage also. I'll have to check. But yes, we have I have in my back pocket a very good recipe for, I'll call it krupnikas because I don't want to step on the name of Baltimore's virita.
Okay, question. Do you, from Jean, do you have a recipe to make pickled or fermented beets? Thank you.
Oh, yes. Here, see the Lithuanian Heritage magazine with the angel and the titles of the articles, and the very last one says, and the beet goes on. Well, right in that issue is the recipe for marinated or pickled beets. So if you want, I'll add that on to that document with the PDFs. Or with the resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 more questions. From Isabella. Do you use kefir or buttermilk for your shaltibarshche?
I use buttermilk because I just like the taste better. Our new immigrants from Lithuania usually prefer kefiras, but this is totally a matter of taste and preference. They're both wonderful.
By the way, I wanted to just say that my mother happens to be from Baltimore, and I have her recipe for viritos, and I will bring it to you, Ona, on Tuesday.
Okay. And
From
whoever
Baltimore.
wanted that recipe,
Old school.
we're gonna post it. Donna, do it's okay for us to share it?
Yeah, but I don't know how to do it. Oh, you mean
Okay,
later?
well,
Yes, of course.
Yeah, we'll share
Gotcha.
it at a future date. But yes, excellent, Donna, achu. Oh my gosh. You know, this is maybe what we should do, is create a forum where people can share their quote unquote traditional recipes that their mother used and their auntie used and their grandmother used. Oh my God, this could be like a mother load. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
Last one?
Last one.
Yeah, last one, because it's, we don't want to keep you.
Yep. Do you happen to know the region where lashinieche are popular?
I think lashinieche, we called them lashinieche. Mrs. Alma Adamkus's mother, who, the Adamkai lived directly next door to us. And Mrs. Adamkus's mother was a very good cook, and she used to make these. She called them lashinuatukai. So they're all the bacon buns. So what the question was, what region?
What region?
I don't know, but I have eaten lashinuache probably everywhere in Lithuania. So I don't know if a particular region can take credit for that. But we've got the recipe and heritage for that also. So you want it, it's in there somewhere. Okay.
Okay. And then Ilse asks, how can one become a member of this group? I don't know if that's the new heritage cooking group or our heritage club, but
Ilse, you are welcome. You keep touch with Sharunas through the PLC Heritage Club, and the rest will follow.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe on that note, we'll wrap it up. Thank you all very much for your attention, your interest, your questions. I was very nervous doing this, but you were all very attentive listeners. So I thank you, and I hope that this won't be our last meeting. We can talk about so many other interesting things. So, achu.
Okay. That brings us to the end of our time today. Thank you all so much for joining us for this English language lecture from the Lithuanian Heritage Club. We hope it gave you a better understanding of the history of Lithuanian food, as well as some helpful tips for making some of the most common dishes. A special thank you again to our presenter, Dr. Ona Daugirdienė, for sharing her knowledge, stories, and recipe tips with us. If you enjoyed today's talk, we invite you to keep an eye out for future lectures and events organized by the Lithuanian World Center. Until then, ačiū labai ir iki pasimatymo.
Okay, and Sharunai, just let us know, how are we gonna post that document with all the information? Where is it gonna be found for all these people?
Okay, I don't know how the audio was, but so everybody who registered for this, we have your email address, so we'll be able to send it to you if you filled out the Google form. We have your email address. If you found out about this through Facebook or just clicked on the link today but did not register, put your email address in the chat if you would like to receive more information. Well, like this PDF that my mom will put together. And we can also add you to the mailing list for future lectures like this one. So just put your email address in the chat box.
So was a commercial for the Schultebusch or not?
Oh,
Or not?
maybe at a future date.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay.
Ačiū. Labam
Ačiū.
laktis. Bye.
See
Happy
ya.
eating.